back to the Early Weigh-In podcast. This Saturday is UFC 283, first pay-per-view of the year down in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. We got 2 title fights up for grabs. In the main event, light heavyweight strap, former champ Glover Teixeira taking on Jamahal Hill for the vacant belt here. And then in the co-main event, 4th time, we do see champion Deiveson Figueiredo and Moreno looking to unify these flyweight titles. On the card, tons of Brazilian talent, a ton of these fights, line not to see the judges. I think there's going to be a ton of exciting fights for us to get back to on Saturday. Try to get us back on track. Last week really wasn't how we wanted to start off the year. UFC 267, a little bit tricky there. Caitlin, despite thinking she won that fight, I knew what I was getting myself into there. Willing to admit I made a bad bet. 3-unit swing for me there alone, if she were to get the nod. But good thing is we got plenty of time to make it up this year, man, and get on track. So before we get started, why don't you go ahead and recap how we finished last week?
Yeah, so like you said, not really the way that I'd want to be handing off the cap. I'd rather us both be in the positive whenever that's happening. But still manageable weeks. We looked down at your card first. The Punahele-Soriano fight, that was probably the most disappointing one. Right. Puna didn't really look like he came in there with many weapons, honestly. He used him up in the first tank. Yeah, or a gas tank. So that was a little bit disappointing. Like you said, the Ketlin Vieira fight, tough L to take, but we knew it was going to be greasy, and it just is what it is. You can't rely on the judges these days. It was a Charles Johnson fight that you got to point out. You got incredible closing line value on that at -170, and he dominated that fight. Jimmy Flick looked like he took that extended layoff off. You ended up the night -4.19 units. Like I said, not terrible and manageable to come back from. Looking over at my card, we both ended up on Dan Ige. I think he was probably the best bet of the card. Yep. I ended up falling into the trap of betting Raoni Barcelos. I got an incredible price tag. I woke up one morning and it was over 800, and I just couldn't help myself. The Sean Strickland-Nasruddin Imavov fight, I had that fight not go in the distance. I don't know. About the second round, you saw Strickland get into the same rhythm that he always gets into, turns it into a sparring fight, and that you could tell that one was going to the judges after the first 10 minutes for sure.
Imavov might be a fraud, man.
I think Imavov got some holes in his game for sure. And then I had a parlay, a violence parlay. You also were on the Rebecki inside the distance. Rebecki just making his debut. Of course, he's supposed to smash him, but under the bright lights. Yeah, we should have known. I ended up the night -1.28 units, but looking to get back on track next week and manageable losses.
Absolutely.
In our main event, we have the vacant light heavyweight title up for grabs between Glover Teixeira and Jamahal Hill. I don't know about you, but this feels like the same breakdown I've made for Glover in his last few years of fighting. We all know he's kind of past his prime, but due to the ever-changing landscape of the light heavyweight division, he has slid his way into some favorable matchups, claimed the belt over the age of 40 years old, and has another opportunity to do it again at 43 years of age. But standing in front of him yet again is another younger, faster, longer, more athletic fighter in Jamahal Hill. And he's actually in the complete opposite boat as far as Hill's quickly risen through the rankings since coming off of the Contender Series in 2019. And he's kind of been placed in this title bout by happenstance. He's probably realistically like the 5th, 6th ranked guy in the division. But here he is fighting for the vacant title. And it's hard to almost wrap your head around how much more experience Glover has than him. Looking down at Glover's career, he had already competed 13 times in the UFC and fought for a belt before Hill had even made his professional debut. I mean, I think it's important to note that this isn't the same Glover that I'm talking about that was fighting for the title against John Jones in 2014. As he's aged in his career, it's been apparent that he's relied more and more on his grappling and moved further away from the brawling days that he used to have. That being said, it does seem like he's always one clean punch away from getting flatlined and everyone being like, why was that old man in there to begin with, Glover's super unique in the fact that his grappling credentials stand alone in a striker heavy division like the light heavyweight division. And it only takes one takedown for him to really give his opponent some trouble. For Jamahal Hill, I think the game plan's pretty simple. You're going to want to keep your distance, circle off the cage, make him pay for those takedown attempts when they do come. He's got every measurable advantage in this fight, but one slip up could mean another arm break like the Paul Craig fight. And if he's as easily taken down like he was in the Thiago Santos fight, I do think that this will be a relatively easy night for Glover. One last thing before I throw it over to UP. I remember where it seemed like in the Thiago Santos fight, at the beginning of every single one of those rounds, you were just holding your breath, praying that Glover could get the takedown in that fight. And, it just... I think that Jamahal Hill is just a better version of that Thiago Santos that was fighting Glover in that fight. He's much faster. Santos was coming off the double knee replacement surgery. And, I think Father Time is finally going to catch up here. And so I am going to officially pick Jamahal Hill, although I do think that long term it's not smart to bet for the striker versus the grappler.
Yeah, wouldn't it be something here, just a thought if Glover were to pull this one out here in Brazil, retire at the ripe age of 43 and just leave this belt vacant again.
Right off into the sunset.
It doesn't get a better way. Just thought it would be awesome to Glover do something like that. In all seriousness, though, watching him and Jerry's fight back this week, for a 42-year-old to still have that in him, man, that was one of the best fights that we've seen, the different momentum swings, and then ending in the absolute last way anybody thought it was going to happen with the Yuri fight, fifth round submission. But I think it's pretty much the same style of fight, like you said, grappler, striker here. I thought it was the same last time, but I think I'm even a little bit more certain here it's going to be Jamahal Hill by TKO, or I think Glover will find the sub. And my gut's kind of leaning the same side towards you, and I think probably going to see Jamahal Hill find that TKO a little bit early in this fight. You talked about being more than a decade younger, longer, more athletic, and I think the speed is just going to be the supreme factor here to get the job done. And at 43, those come from behind victories after getting hurt and wobbled, being able to find the takedown. I kind of think they're behind him, and Hill has that lights out power that won't let Glover come back. And while Jerry was dangerous in his own right for the unorthodox strikes and things that he was going to throw, I really do think Jamahal Hill is a whole lot more dangerous on the feet, a whole lot more of a worry for Glover. And the longer this is played out on the feet, I think we're going to be holding your breath that Glover's finding the takedown. But, then you watch the Thiago Santos fight, and I don't want to just use that to, shit on Jamahal Hill, because, the dude did go in the championship rounds for the first time, still had a good gas tank, dug deep, defended 20 takedowns, and still had that gas tank come round 4. He's starting to prove me wrong, because you and I have really never been the biggest Jamahal Hill believer. But seeing a guy give up 6 takedowns, kind of give up your back a little bit, trying to get to the cage, that's just things that you can't do with someone with a grappler of the pedigree like Glover. And there's going to be moments for him to finish this fight too. And another factor for Glover to kind of throw in there is he's been training for this 5-rounder for probably 2 or 3 months now. He's supposed to fight Jerry in December. I think he's going to be in supreme shape, ready to go 5 rounds, where Jamahal Hill got that call where the guys were getting the decision read in December. So I don't know. I think Jamahal Hill is going to get the TKO to say all that, but that's what my gut's going with. But I don't really feel like playing Jamahal Hill is the smartest thing to do. I think there's going to be violence here, so I've just taken it doesn't start round 4 and under 3.5. I think that's what I'm most comfortable parlaying. I struggle what happens at a higher clip. Does Glover find the takedown, slice through him, find the sub, or does the dude who's 12 years younger, longer, faster, clip the 43-year-old who's known to be clipped before? And I think that's what I got to go with. So despite thinking Jamahal Hill would never touch gold, seriously, I think he's going to walk out of Brazil as a champion on Saturday. In our co-main event in the evening, looking to unify the flyweight straps here, we have Deiveson Figueiredo taking on Brandon Moreno for the 4th time. And, I was looking online. Seriously, I might be in this boat alone, but, man, I'm honestly... I'm kind of tired of seeing this fight. I truly am. As many of you know, maybe not all of you do, it's 1-1-1 in the trilogy so far. You got the first one where Fig probably wins 4-1. Judging's a little spotty. There's a point deduction, ends up being a draw. The second one is where Fig's weight cut's a little bit iffy, and then you go out there and see Brandon Moreno look flashy, knocked him down, submits him, and then in the third one, he evens it up. Fig looks in phenomenal shape. We weren't able to go a full 5 rounds, get some knockdowns. I think a knockdown around 3, 4, 5 to steal it on the scorecards. And, not counting out a 5th fight here. You'll be the first one to tell everybody that Fig is not the cleanest fighter. would not be surprised if we have another point deduction. I would not be surprised if Figueiredo misses weight, not even eligible to win this belt. Seriously, not counting out a fifth fight here despite not wanting to see it again. And, that weight cut for Fig is just such a huge factor as to how I really cap this fight and how I see it playing out, because I think a healthy Figueiredo has shown me that he can do damage and probably beat Brandon Moreno. But the talk online, he was a couple pounds out earlier in the week, which looked good. But seeing some of the pictures, some of the videos, he looks a little bit drained in my opinion. And I really am ready to see the the weigh-ins before I make a good read and see if I'm going to play this one. The last one when he was at Fight Ready, he was able to go the full 25 minutes, and the judges favored that power that he had over the volume of Moreno, and now it's kind of going to potentially be the same thing in Brazil, so that worries me backing the side of Brandon Moreno. But at 35 years old, I think that weight cut's only going to get harder. At the lower end of weight classes, you cannot lose the speed, and why you leave Fight Ready, Nero Force One, some of the best disciplined weight cutting people in the world for a fight. It's a little mind-boggling to me, I guess is how I could say it. But Brandon Moreno had his fair share of camp changes here as well. Dealing with the James Krause stuff. He's now over with Safe Saud, I think, doing some work at Fortis and at the PI. And I think that's going to be good for Brandon Moreno as well, because he did get the fourth round liver kick stoppage over Kai Kara France, but backing him, man, at minus 200, I kind of was less than impressed leading up to that. Even think he might have even been down on the scorecards, and I think that drama behind him and stuff, moving to a new camp, could be good for him. I won't have any action here, but I'm leading to think that this weight cut is tough on Fig, and I think Brandon Moreno could get a championship round stoppage here, man. I know you're pretty high on Brandon Moreno.
Yeah, this is a tough fight for me to look through a non-biased lens, man. Moreno's one of the fan favorites in my household for sure, and I doubt it's going to stop here at this one. As far as the actual look from a betting perspective, I do think the pick'em line is appropriate. It's actually a little surprising to me that the money is starting to come in on Moreno, and we're actually seeing it kind of lean towards the minus 120, minus 125s for Moreno. I won't go through the previous fights, but there are a few takeaways I had from them all. Moreno can take that power of Figgy. I know Figgy is a scary motherfucker, but I have to imagine the doubt that Moreno might have had in the previous matchups of taking the punching power of Figgy should be completely gone. Actually, in my eyes, Moreno is the only one that really holds a finishing threat in this fight. He's already done it before. And two, just the toughness of him. I'm not worried about Figgy knocking him out here. I did watch a interview with Moreno with Brett Okamoto the other day, and I like the headspace that Moreno's in. Truthfully, it sounded like he was dealing with a ton of pressure, defending the belt for the first time with the country of Mexico behind him, and I think that he's excited to see Figgy feel that same type of pressure fighting in his own home country. I was really worried for Moreno in that last fight when Figgy teamed up at Fight Ready, like you said. And, I hold Cejudo in pretty high regards as far as his coaching ability. Yeah. And I personally credit a lot of Figgy's success for that fight and the preparation and game planning that happened in that fight. So him going back to Brazil, maybe falling back into old training habits. Personally, I don't think that Figgy has the best head on his shoulders. I think that he's a little self-absorbed, or he just kind of gives off the energy that he just thinks that he's better. He might not have to work as hard just because he has some God-given talent. Right. Lastly, you touched on it a little bit. Figgy's 35 years old. The weight cut only gets harder, and flyweight is the least forgiving of any weight class when you start to lose that step. Moreno only being 29 years old. He's getting the looks at the UFC PI. I think that he's improving. I think as after we see the weigh-ins, as long as I don't see anything crazy from either side, I probably will end up playing Moreno. Although I'm going to be bringing it down a notch because I do know that I'm looking at this fight because I'm a fan of Moreno and wanting to bet him. So I won't be betting him heavy, but I do lean Moreno, and I think he's the rightful favorite now. In our third fight from the main event, we have Gilbert Burns taking on Neil Magny. I really liked this fight when it was first announced, but as it got closer and closer to fight time, it became much more apparent that this was a huge mismatch. Yeah. One side of me wants to make the argument that Magny is just one of those weird stylistic matchups for fighters that throw them off their game and always ends up making it closer than it should be. He definitely has a huge size advantage in this matchup with a 5-inch difference in height, 9-inch difference in reach. But I keep on circling back around to the Michael Chiesa fight where Magny just couldn't stop the takedown. And I feel like Gilbert's going to have a very similar approach coming into this fight. Honestly, I think Gilbert could also have success in the striking if he wanted to, but after watching his fight with Wonderboy, I think he's far more concerned with getting a W than he is putting on a show. So I imagine that he will shoot for that takedown early and look to control him. And you might say, like, what about the Hamzat fight? But I think that you can throw that one out. I think Burns didn't really have many options on offense other than to bite down on his mouthpiece and throw hands. If this were a 5-round fight, I think Magny would be a live dog strictly because cardio is one of his best attributes, but I'm fairly confident that Burns' cardio is going to hold up over 15 minutes regardless of how the fight plays out. How do you feel about it?
I feel pretty much the same way you do. I told you after Burns had that fight with Hamzat, who was just supposed to steamroll him, who's sitting on the cage with Darren Till waiting for him to walk down to him. That was a big moment, dude. I think I don't know if he knew he had that in him, man. And to see him, I just don't think that Neil Magny has any type of stopping power like that to deter Gilbert Burns from walking forward anymore. But the size advantage always does make it a little bit tricky. It's like guys just can't find a way to judge that range or hit Neil clean, so they just resort to his clinching and cage control, and he can always outpace him with the elite cardio you talked about. I just, like I said, that the no power decision victory is always from Neil. I just think it's not going to stop Neil, or not going to stop Burns from coming forward, landing the big shots, and backing him against the cage to eventually find the takedowns. You talked about the Chiesa fight. RDA beat up the calf, took him down to submit him as well. They're both also previous lightweight fighters, and then you see Gilbert go out there and execute that game plan against someone like Wonderboy. That was one of the first times we saw Wonderboy absolutely controlled on the mat like that. But at the same time, you know how hard it is for me to fade Neil Magny, who's just been a money train for me. I've cashed on him at dog odds against Jing Liang, against Jeff Neal, like basically even money against Rocco Martin and Daniel Rodriguez. It's like the experience, the length, the gas tank. It is trouble for a lot of these guys who are trying to break into the top 10, top 15. But as soon as he fights the elite fighters of the welterweight division, it doesn't go his way, especially when these guys can grapple. He threw in that split decision he had over Max Griffin. That was just not a good look for him at this stage in his career. So is the line wide? Possibly. But with little to no finishing upside from Magny, it almost doesn't make you want to take a dog shot. His path to victory is solely by decision, which I will give him credit. The guy is 16-2 in decision victories on the scorecards, but we're in Brazil, man, and if it's close, I do think it's gonna go toward Gilbert Burns. But he's the pick all day, man.
For my fight of the night, I have chosen a middleweight bout between Gregory Rodriguez and Brunno Ferreira. I don't see how this one isn't fireworks, man. As we've grown accustomed to over the last few fights of RoboCops, he is always down for a war. I think skill for skill, he might have Brunno beat almost everywhere, but that doesn't negate the fact that RoboCop only really comes alive after eating a few shots to the face, The problem with that way of fighting, in this fight particular, is that Ferreira throws with bad intentions with all of his punches. One thing that I think will be difficult for Ferreira in this fight is actually getting the fight to the mat, and that's usually where we see some of the best work that he does with his ground and pound. RoboCop, a BJJ black belt, has decent wrestling, has shown toughness in all of his fights that just guarantee that he's going to be a difficult matchup for anybody in the division. This is also a short notice fight for Ferreira, who stepping up to take this fight on a week's notice, which only makes me believe more that we'll see Brunno go for broke early. If RoboCop decides to engage in the stand-up, even when he has a clear grappling advantage, I think we're in for an amazing scrap, and that's why I chose it for my fight of the night.
Lined at minus 500 to not see the judges. This is going to be, like you said, fireworks written all over it. For me, man, Gregory RoboCop has just become one of my favorite fighters to watch. Jiu-Jitsu world champion. He's got that judo black belt. You saw him tossing Jun Young Park around the cage, in the clinch. And I think he's making huge strides on the feet. Everything looks nice and tight when he's throwing, and he's willing to put on some fun fights and bang with these guys. And he seemed to have a pretty good gas tank on him as well. And despite having that chin issue, to kind of fight through the adversity in the Park fight, the Cheaty fight to come back and win, it's nice to see that as well if you're ever going to put money on him. And Ferreira's pretty much the same way, dude. Undefeated, 100% finish rate. 7 of his 9 wins in round 1. I think the guy has never seen a 7th minute in his fighting career. Swap stances, throws heat, like you said. And if he gets you down, he's got some pretty nasty ground and pound himself. I think you picked an incredible fight. I think someone is hitting the deck for sure. I do think that someone is going to be Brunno Ferreira. But I told you that, RoboCop has him covered everywhere, but it almost gives me that Jordan Williams vibes just for some type of reason. Little bit chinny maybe RoboCop is, but Brunno's the type that knows he probably has about 4 or 5 minutes of real gas tank to him on short notice. Looking to come in here hot, make a statement. It's a win-win situation for you. The UFC's probably going to give you a generous matchup for taking this one here, and if you win, make a name for yourself, make $50,000. So, hell of a fight to pick, man. RoboCop going to be the pick. For my fight of the night, I'm going to go with lightweight division. Terrance McKinney taking on Ismael Bonfim. Ismael's one of 2 brother set fighting here on the card. One of, I think, 3 they've now signed off of the UFC, and I honestly think they might have topped the Bashrats. I think this could be the best set of brothers that we got in the UFC. The UFC is letting them debut on the same card in their home country. I think they know what they have in front of them. But, I know lightweight's full of killers, but Ismael drew a very, very much tougher matchup in my opinion. McKinney is just one of the most freakish, athletic, fast starters as they come. All 3 of his fights to get him into the UFC, plus the debut over Frivola, are all combined for like a whopping 2 minutes, and then Ziem and Gonzalez both dispatches them in like under half a round. If your name is not Drew Dober, you don't get out of that round 1 with him. He just really seems to shot guys when he lands, and he's just, like I said, just far more athletic and on the feet. But man, prior to the incident in college, he's one of the best collegiate wrestlers in the country as well. I think the guy truly has one of the foundations to be a very good fighter, but just kind of seems to crack when that fight kind of brought back his way a little bit. And I don't want to just say he has bad cardio. I think it's just a little bit immature and doesn't necessarily know how to manage it properly. He throws everything in the first 2 minutes of his fight, and then after that has nothing left. A bit more patience, I think he showed last time out against Gonzalez. Didn't force all the striking, was willing to mix it up with the grappling, and still found the finish. With Ismael, I think he's going to win fights in the UFC. I'm going to go ahead and say that, but I don't really have any interest in betting him here, especially pre-fight, because I think you could possibly be ripping up that ticket in under half a round like you like to bet on, But if he survives that, I think he's one of the best live betting opportunities on the entire card here. He's got very sharp boxing, likes to work the body, proven over 15 minutes, very experienced. I think Terrance McKinney is going to get the job done. I think he's just going to get in there and physically be a whole lot bigger, a whole lot stronger than Bonfim, who looks to be a little bit of a small lightweight. I think if he puts that grappling to use, I think Terrance McKinney is going to get the submission early.
I don't think he's going to put the grappling to use. I think he goes in there. He's fighting under the bright lights of Brazil. This is his first time out of the country. His last 3 fights have been in the Apex, and the one fight that he did have in front of a crowd, it was in Arizona, and it lasted 7 seconds. So I do think that he's going to go right back to the well, what got him to the show, and that's going to be either kill or be killed in the first half a round, 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I think Ismael, if he can survive it, he really only has to survive that first 2 minutes, and I think Terrance McKinney will look for the first way out. I love him as a fighter to watch, but I don't trust him with my money at all. I do think that this fight's going to be over quick and a great fight to watch. All right, for my fighter to watch, I've picked Yelton Almeida. This guy's always going to be on my fighter to watch list, man. Dude has some of the craziest genetics in the UFC. He's fighting up at heavyweight, even though it's not his true weight class. He comes in at 215-pound mark, just completely shredded and way stronger than guys who have more than 50 pounds on him. And the secret's out, man. He's coming into this a massive minus 1,000 favorite in this matchup against Shamil. And for whatever reason, the UFC really wants to feed Shamil to Yelton, I don't know why, but they try their best to use him as a stepping stool for their prospects. And just to back up my point, after the UFC watched him get KO'd by Curtis Blades, they then scheduled him to fight Gane, then Dawkins 3 different times, then Aspinall, then Pavlovich, and now Yelton Almeida for the 3rd time in Almeida's backyard in Brazil. This is a perfect setup fight for one of the most terrifying prospects in the UFC, which is why I had to choose him as my fighter to watch. I think we're in for a show on Saturday.
What would Almeida do to Jamahal Hill?
Oh, he would be the champion if they matched him up with Jamahal Hill. Man.
Bad things, right?
Bad things.
My fighter to watch, man, Shogun Rua, looking for the last hoorah for him here, going down in Brazil, chance to ride off into the sunset. But at 41 years old, man, he's got a couple thousand fight miles on him adding up. The UFC has done their best to give him a winnable fight here, taking on Ihor Pretoria. Dude's 0-1 in the UFC, and one of the most padded records you're going to come across, on Tapology. A dude coming off one of the absolute ass beatings from Nick Negermanu. But he is only 26. The power, the speed, it's going to be a big difference here. I think Shogun should really probably try to mix in the grappling. I think that could be a big factor for him here. It could extend this fight, could probably make Ihor work a little bit. I think, even now, always in the past, Shogun has probably been the better fighter, skill for skill, but they're just at two different points in their careers, and I just don't know if Shogun can eat the clean shot at this point. Retirements in MMA, they just don't typically go well. The last one that comes to mind for me, you got Frankie Edgar taking a massive step down in competition, home city of New York City, and gets deaded in round one in front of his family, and part of me thinks that the speed and durability is just not there for Shogun, and the same thing's going to happen. Curious to see how the legend goes out, man.
Yeah. Moving on to our underdog pick. It's a tough card to pick an underdog, but I am going to go with Shogun. I think he might be the only Brazilian that is an underdog on this card. And, like you kind of mapped it out earlier when you broke down Shogun. Ihor is definitely a very favorable matchup in the division, and one of the best chances that Shogun's going to get to ride out on top. Yeah. I'm curious to see what Ihor looks like in the later rounds. I think early he's going to pose a lot of threats to Shogun. I think Shogun's striking defense is questionable at best. But if this fight can get extended and Shogun can maybe lean on some of the experience that he has, I think that there is a way for him to get a W here. And at plus 175 or better, I think that that's one of the better looking underdogs on this card, although I will not be playing that bet.
This is a tricky slate of underdogs. There's literally just one all week that I've been looking at, Daniel Marcos. I got him at plus 145 on BetMGM. He's actually taking some love this week, looking at like the minus 130 areas in a lot of books. Plus 130s, yeah, my bad. I think it's honestly, truly, man, it's a 50-50 fight at worst. I think I could even lean Marcos as the favorite if this fight does stay on the feet for extended periods. On BetOnline, Marcos opens as a minus 150. Public's actually steamed Oliveira all the way up to minus 175 at one point. And, really the only favorable thing I think I could find here, they're both off the Contender Series, but Oliveira's already made that UFC walk before, maybe knocked out some of those UFC jitters fighting Tony Gravely, and is in his backyard in Brazil. But on the feet, man, his Muay Thai is like extremely wild. There's some flying knees, there's some spinning back fists. Marcos is very defensively sound, likes to keep his range, and Oliveira was threatening Gravely with a nice guillotine, but I didn't really like any of the wrestling entries on the Contender Series. DC's even kind of shitting on him on his takedown entry. He actually gets the takedown, but DC is like, I cannot believe he found the takedown on that. And like I said, I like the fight to play out on the feet, to be a striking battle, and I was super, super impressed with Marcos in that last fight. Looked patient. The man didn't waste anything, any energy, was tight in the pocket, was extending, letting off long combinations, and he just kept the range so well, defensively sound. And while they have Oliveira listed at 5'4", the guy did look like about an inch taller than Gravely, who they have listed at 5'5". So I don't think the size is going to look as pronounced as it is on paper, but I do think the way that Marcos fights, he looks a lot longer than he is. He's got a nice calf kick that he can also kind of disguise and come up the middle with, like a front kick. I told you I get a lot of Jonathan Martinez when I watch this guy strike. They strike a whole lot alike. And one thing I really haven't heard a lot of people mention is Daniel Marcos' performance on the Contender Series was coming off of a 3-year layoff as an underdog, to a guy who had already fought on the Contender Series before. I was even more impressed after seeing that, and can only expect to possibly even see a better Daniel Marcos in the cage and hopefully catch a dog tick in the first fight of the night.
Moving on to our prop to watch for. Mine is Almeida round 1 submission. I think that Jelton's going to go in there, do whatever he wants to Shamil, and I think that it's most likely going to be by submission. He's done it in his last 3 wins, and I don't think it stops here. I think there's a lot of people this week that are taking some stabs on the plus 300 or better Jelton by TKO. I totally understand that. A lot of the times it involves ground and pound before he gets that submission, but I do think that in this matchup Shamil's going to be tough enough and give him enough opportunities while he's trying to get back up to his feet that Jelton's just going to wrap up that neck and get the submission. Plus, you can get it at plus 135. Just about every other way that you're trying to bet Jelton Almeida inside the distance, you're paying some juice, a lot of juice for. So it's either Jelton round 1 minus 160 or the prop of Jelton round 1 sub, which is what I like the most at plus 135.
I think that's absolutely what he does to Shamil as well, man. Prop for me, I'm going to go Gregory Rodriguez and Brunno Ferreira under 1.5 rounds at minus 170. You broke down this fight because this fight has violence written all over it. I love this prop. But, Gregory Rodriguez is clearly the better fighter, has all the physical advantages, size, reach, full camp behind him, all the skill set to really go out here and just put Brunno away early if he wants to. Path to victory is on both the feet and a massive path to victory on the mat if he decides to mix things up. And then under 1.5 is basically Brunno's win condition as well. The guy's not seen a 7th minute in his career. That 100% finish rate basically all in round 1. Both of the guys are pretty much killed or be killed type of fighters that make me like to bet an under 1.5. So full confidence that one of these guys hitting the deck under 7.5 minutes here.
Moving on to our best bet of the card. This one's kind of a weird one to talk about just because it will probably get voided before it actually plays. But my best bet of the card is Johnny Walker by decision only at minus 135. Paul Craig does not win minutes. And 14 of his UFC fights, he's been out-controlled by his opponent in 12 of them. He's really a sub or bust in my opinion, and I think that the blueprint to beat him was given out by Volkan Oezdemir in his last fight. Johnny Walker has been getting knocked out awful in his last few fights. Thankfully, there's not really a knockout threat in this fight, and since he switched over to SBG Ireland, I do think that he's taken a much more patient approach to fighting, and he's much more comfortable with dragging the fight out, picking the shots that he wants to take, and I think that it's very likely that we see him just outpoint Paul Craig and Paul Craig not have the wrestling to get the fight where it needs to be. I think there might be some sketchy moments where Paul Craig pulls guard or Johnny Walker ends up in the guard of Paul Craig, and thankfully we don't have to worry about a finish if it's decision only. Yeah. But I do not see a world where Paul Craig gets the fight to the ground and is also winning minutes on top. He's not the type of guy to control the fighter. So Walker decision only minus 135, most likely going to be a void bet, but I do think that that's a great way to approach a fight that has a lot of validity.
I thought Oezdemir was going to finish him too, so very well could be cashing the Walker decision. I don't think it's out of the realm. Cool. Best bet, I'm going to go Thiago Moises. I got in on him early at minus 310 like 2 days ago, and he has taken a ton of money since, now sitting like north of minus 400. And minus 400 where I actually capped him at like 80% here doing tape. The guy is only 27 years old still. I think constantly still getting better at American Top Team. Great camp to work out of. And he's got one of the better resumes of anybody that's not ranked in the division. The guy's been 15 minutes with Benil Dairouche, who's a top 5, and Ismagulov as well. The guy's went 20-plus minutes with the champ Islam Makhachev. And anytime you've given him a step down in competition like Alexander Hernandez, Bobby Green, Christos Giagos, the guy handles them just fine. I don't even think he has that level of competition with Costa in front of him on Saturday. Costa's coming off of a 2-fight win streak. The guy has 24 professional fights. There's only 2 of them on the tape index to watch, but dude, I seriously was less than impressed. The guy leaves himself open to be countered in the pocket. He had zero sense of urgency. At one time, he hurts a guy badly to the body, doesn't finish him. One fight, he's stalling up against the cage. The ref breaks him apart 2 or 3 times. In May of last year, in 2022, he's losing exchanges on the feet to a just solely jiu-jitsu black belt, who then is able to grind him on the mat. Get his, kind of grind him out, get the takedowns, immediately take mount. The guy's strengths lie in his Muay Thai. He does have a good variety of kicks, a nice left hook to him. But I thought he was noticeably slowing down as fight progressed, which was leading to that cage stalling and not being able to finish that guy. And dude, if Moises is really able to get that wrestling going early, I think it's going to pay dividends down the stretch. I think he's going to wear on this guy. Found the sub in round 2 or 3. If you got minus 300 anywhere out there, I don't hate you even just laying the juice on that. But I do think this guy is the sole best parlay leg on Saturday.
Moving on to our quick pick section of the night, we start off in the bantamweight division where we see Daniel Marcos taking on Simon Oliveira. And I think we're kicking this off with a disagreement right off the bat. I am going to be taking Simon Oliveira. I think Marcos is a popular dog this week, and I definitely see why. The 13-0 immediately popped out at me, but I do think that Simon Oliveira is at least more proven up until this point. So until proven otherwise, I'm going with him.
Yeah, I'm going to be on the side of Daniel Marcos. Did take a 1-unit dog shot on him. It'd be nice to start that at a 1.45 unit little cushion, Moving on to the men's bantamweight division, staying in the men's bantamweight division. Luan Lacerda versus Cody Stamann. I don't know, man. The one bet that I did kind of stick off the page was the under 2.5 that set at like plus 200 all week. Luan Lacerda is like sub or bust. I've seen the guillotine be trouble for Stamann before, and then hell, man, Stamann maybe gives him the vet lesson, and it's just way too much for him. So plus 200, I don't care if anybody takes a shot on that. I'm gonna lean Cody Stamann to get it done though.
I have a little bit more confidence in Stamann. I think that he walks through Lacerda here. He should, right? So I'll go with Stamann here. Moving up to the women's featherweight division, Josiane Nunez taking on Zara Farn. And I'm on the Josiane Nunez side. I've backed her quite a few times by TKO every single time, and I think I'm going to hold off on this one just because we're having to pay a little bit of juice to do that this time. I was going to say,
dude, juice on women's TKO. Right. It's smart to lay off, but dude, Farn coming off like a 2 or 3 year layoff at like 37 years old, she's probably going to get TKO. Right. I'm going to go Josiane Nunez as well. Men's welterweight division, Warley Alves versus Nicholas Dalby, one of the most bet on fights, this week. Warley Alves opens as a dog, has now been bet all the way to a favorite, probably the most popular dog this week, and he's got the finishing upside. But Nicholas Dalby is a damn little weasel, and I'm telling you, I think if Alves does not put him away, rounds 2 and 3 are going to be close. Props to getting plus money, but pass at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Dalby does know how to sneak out the wins here. I wouldn't like to bet on Alves. He's been hit or miss. You never know which one's showing up in the cage.
Covington and then loses to
right, man. Right. So I think I'm going to go with Dalby here. Fading the public almost at this point. Moving on to the 5th fight of the night in the lightweight division, Terrance McKinney versus Ismael Bonfim. I've got the under half a round, and I think the majority of that time, or for that to happen, the majority of the time, Terrance McKinney is going to be the winner of that fight. So I'm going for Terrance McKinney. I think he'll win it.
I'm going for Terrance McKinney as well. When you look at him and see the skills, the foundation, it's almost like if you could get the cardio right, you have a really good fighter on your hands. I'm going to go Terrance McKinney, and that money line when he gets a 30-second knockout looks so generous at minus 125. Right. Going to be Terrance McKinney as well. Jailton Almeida, Jamahal at heavyweight. I think Jailton Almeida is going to run through the man. He's a bad dude, man, and he's probably going to touch gold one day.
Yeah, I think so as well. I'm Jailton Almeida all day. Moving up, we go to the welterweight division where we see Gabriel Bonfim taking on Munir Lazez. Maybe I should have made Lazez my dog. I think that he has a pretty good shot. I at least think that he has some pretty sharp striking skills, and I think that it's very possible that he could get the job done. I just don't have enough confidence and haven't really looked into that fight enough for me to lay the money on it.
Yeah, I just remember Gabriel Bonfim, coming off the Contender Series, he was one of the guys that I was actually like most excited to see fight. He was one of the guys that I was most impressed with at 13-0, making his debut in Brazil. He got the more generous matchup between his brothers, and Munir Lazez, I kind of thought was maybe a live dog. Dude's 35 years old. That kind of shocked me a little bit. He's a whole lot older than I thought he was. but he's made the UFC walk. He's been to 15 minutes. I don't hate the dog shot whatsoever if you do. I'm going to be on the other side of Gabriel Bonfim. In the prelims again, men's lightweight, Thiago Moises versus Melquizel Costa. I'm going Thiago Moises, round 2 sub.
Okay, I think I'm also going Thiago Moises. I think he might just get a decision, though. Moving up to the middleweight division, Gregory Rodriguez versus Brunno Ferreira. I don't think this is seeing the judges. I think Gregory Rodriguez finishes him in the first round. If he was smart, by sub, but I don't even think he has to do that. He'd probably just make it a war and outlast Brunno Ferreira.
Yeah, I got Gregory Rodriguez in the under 1.5 there as well. Prelim main event. Hope Shogun rides out on top. He's going to be the pick. I don't know if it happens.
I want Shogun to win. I don't know. I think Ihor's striking is good enough to club him and knock him out. Moving up to staying in the light heavyweight division, Paul Craig versus Johnny Walker. This is one of the most anticipated fights for myself on this card. I'm picking Johnny Walker here. I think that he just has the tools to keep this fight on the feet, and I think that he could win a decision or knock him out.
Yeah, the UFC's like rolling the dice here, with the Paul Craig and Johnny Walker fights. Starting it off first fight of the pay-per-view, hoping it's going to be fireworks, but very well could be a lot of guard pulling and backing away, a boring fight, That's the hope the fight that it is for Johnny Walker. He's going to be the pick. Hope he cashes you the decision-only ticket. Jessica Andrade, Lauren Murphy. Murphy's a dog, man, but Jessica does not going to respect anything coming back her way. I think she's going to walk her down and probably finish her by TKO.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same boat with you. I don't like Murphy as a nail too much, and I think Jessica Andrade has enough power to actually put her out. Moving up to the welterweight division, Gilbert Burns versus Neil Magny. I think Gilbert goes in there, does what he wants to with Neil Magny. I don't think he gets a finish. I think he rides him out for 15 minutes and just wants to stay in the title shot picture.
Yeah, I'm with you. Gilbert Burns, I like the decision prop as well. First title fight, Deiveson Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno. This is tricky as far as a money line aspect because it's already come down to the power versus volume, and now it's in Brazil. But I love Brandon Moreno plus 100 finish only on DraftKings. He's already in 3 fights, the only one who's finished the fight. And now to see Figueiredo kind of squinting, veined out, trying to make 125 without Henry Cejudo. If anybody's finishing somebody, I think it's Brandon Moreno, and at plus 100 to get it back if he gets robbed. I love that bet, man. I love it.
Yeah, no, I like that as well. I think I'm just going to go the money line on Moreno. I think he could go in there and really put a whooping on Figueiredo, who I think is on the brink. Someday it's going to happen, but Father Time's going to catch up with him. And Moreno just getting better, getting the looks at the PI. I'm Team Moreno for sure. And then in the main event, Glover Teixeira versus Jamahal Hill. You know how I feel about it. I do think Jamahal Hill will find that shot and put out Glover Teixeira, sadly. Although I would love to see Teixeira walk out with the belt.
Yeah, I would love Glover to walk out with the belt. It pains me to say that the dude I've just been constantly wrong about is the guy I think is going to be champ on Saturday. Jamahal Hill by knockout is going to be the pick for me too, unfortunately. UFC's welcoming us. First pay-per-view of the year down in Rio de Janeiro with 15 fights. A ton of these fights lined not to go the distance, man. I'm super excited for Saturday. I think we've got a ton of excellent fights on the hands. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Hope you like the spots we're giving out. We'll release the cards later on this week, and then we'll see you next week.
Peace.